Hello everybody, it's Leianne at Quilters Cupboard in Uxbridge. It's time for one of my But Wait, There's More series video. This particular month I'm going to do a ruler that probably a lot of you have not seen or spent any time with, and it's called the Split Rects ruler. So it's a little bit like a half square triangle, but it's a rectangle. The intriguing part with making a split rectangle is that the seams don't come into the corner. And that's usually what ends up causing people problems. That's why they end up nipping off the points of whatever shape they're making with the rectangle, whatever the design is that they're making. So Deb Tucker has created this ruler called the Split Rects, and it is bigger than some of her other rulers. It's bigger than the V-block or the corner beam or the Tucker trimmer one, but that's because it can do bigger components and give you more of a punch and a wow factor, give you the chance to use fabric that has more of a pattern on it instead of it just having to be a tone on tone or a small print. You can use a bigger scale print and still be able to see some of that on your pieces. The idea is that you're cutting pieces that start as a strip of fabric, and you're going to cut an angular piece that when you sew two of them together gives you a rectangle with the seam exactly where it needs to go. I'm going to show you some samples of things that I've done after I show you a demo of how I make them. So as with many of her rulers, she's got information right on the ruler that will tell you the size of the strips that you need to be cutting. So similar to a flying goose component where your units are going to be a 1:2, 2:1 ratio. So it's going to be twice as tall as it is wide. So depending on the size that you are making, you're going to look down for the finished size of the components that you're making. For example, if you wanted a 2x4 inch finished split rectangle, you're going to cut strips that are 5 inches. Can we see that on the ruler? If you are making bigger ones, 3x6 inch finished units, you're going to cut strips that are 7 inches. That's what I've got on the table here. You can go all the way up to 4x8 inch units, and you're going to cut those strips at 9 inches, down to teeny tiny ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sizes. That's pretty cool. That's very versatile for one ruler. So there's information sizing, there's angles for cutting, there's angles and numbers for trimming, and I'm going to go through that to show you what we're looking at. Okay, so I mentioned that I want to make some 3x6 inch split rectangles. So if I'm doing that, I'm going to start with my fabric in a strip that, again, if I want 3x6 inch, it's hard to see on the dark fabric, I'm starting with 7 inch width of fabric strips. The first thing that you're going to do is cut off your selvage. You don't want to have any selvage on there. So I've lined up a line on my ruler, on the bottom of my strip, tuck another one beside it, cut off your selvage so you've got a nice clean edge. So then what we're looking at on the ruler is we've got a line here. I take a blank piece of paper, put it under the ruler, look at that, we can see it better. Place on cut edge of strip. Well, that pretty much tells us what we need to do. That broad line, it's a thick one, on the ruler is going to go on the cut edge, meaning the edge that I've just cut and squared up nice and neatly. So that is going to go along the edge that I cut. The top of the strip is up where the notch is. The bottom of the strip is lined up right underneath the size that I'm making. It says 3x6 inch finished units. That's the size that I'm cutting. So I'm going to cut up the side of the ruler just like that. Now, because I left my strip of fabric wrong sides together, just the same way it comes off the bolt, I have got mirror images of those wedges that I've got. You can see that the angle is different for each of those. I wanted mirror images in this particular instance, but if you want something that's not, if you want them all the same, you open up your strip. If you want them all angled the same way, if you want all of them all the way along to have the angle that goes from your bottom right to the upper left, that's what you're going to do, is open up your strip and leave it face up. Now I've cut off the first two, as you can see. Now what do? I'm going to rotate the ruler 180 degrees. Does this sound familiar? This is exactly what we did with the V-block ruler, wasn't it? We went from the initial cut, the first one is always easy, then we're going to go to the second cut. And in this case, there is a section on the ruler way down here at the bottom that says second trim. When we think about, we've got an angle here that we want to line up underneath the line here that says second trim guideline, and we want it to come all the way down to the second trim notch down here. Think about this as a notch. So when I lay that over top of the line that I cut, and I slide it down so that the bottom of my strip is now down to here, I'm going to have a straight edge to be able to cut right along. But before I do that, I want to double check when you're making your first cuts, when you're first starting to work with a tool. How about making a double check and say, okay, the first pair that I cut were easy. I want to lay that over top of what's underneath my ruler and see if it's going to turn out the same. And it is. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to slide up the side of the ruler, and I've got myself another pair of split rectangle components. Now remember, I was mentioning if you want them all to be facing the same direction, just open up your strip and you're only cutting one at a time. If you want them all facing lower, with the seam facing from the lower right to the upper left, you're going to leave your strip facing up. If you want them all to look like this guy, obviously that's not going to work. Doesn't matter what we do, it's not going to give me the angle that I need. For that, think about how he was cut on the bottom side of the pair, so you can achieve all of them with that kind of an angle. If you flip the strip over, you can cut it with the wrong side facing up, and you're going to get exactly the same piece as this. So when I cut that and flip it over, it's going to give me a piece that angles in that direction. That's how you get them all going from the bottom left to the upper right. Okay, so I've got a couple of those there. I'm also going to, let's do this. I'll do the same thing with my green. I'm going to, because I want to show you the pieces and how we sew them together. So again, we've got the strip cut the width that it needs to be. I'm going to trim off my selvage to give me a nice clean cut edge. Then the cut edge line on the ruler goes right over top of what I just trimmed, the size down at the bottom, and I'm going to cut up the side. I've got a pair of green ones now, and again, they are mirror image of each other. And when I want to pair them with another color to give myself a split rectangle unit, I'm going to take the one that's facing the same direction, and that's the one I'm going to pair it with. I will have to be able to flip them around so that the angle is going the same direction when they're facing me this way, with the fat bottom down on the bottom of the unit. Flip that one around to give me a split rectangle unit. This is the guy that was on the bottom, wasn't he? This is its mirror image. If I try to match that with this guy, there is no way, there is no how I'm going to be able to get that to give me a split rectangle. Something new and different and whizzy, but not a split rectangle. It needs to go with, again, one that is facing exactly the same direction as he is, so they're little bestie friends, and spin that guy around, and that's what's going to give me the split rectangle unit for that. So again, they need to be facing the same direction, spin them around, and sew them together to get a split rectangle. So I'm going to show you a couple of blocks that I've sewn, because there's a couple of things I want you to keep in mind when you're sewing them. So I've got a bunch that I have paired here, and you can see that same thing. I have taken units that, if the red one faced this way, then the green one that sews with it faces the same direction, spins around. So that's looking the same as that guy. When I want to sew them together, this guy I haven't trimmed yet, when I want to sew them together, what I recommend is that you sew them together in such a fashion that you've got a little bit of a tip that's sticking up the top. And I'll show you that on the paper. You see there's a little triangle that's sticking up there, and there's a little triangle that sticks down at the bottom. And the reason for that is because then when it gets pressed over, either to one side or if it gets pressed open, the lines come close to lining up. And I'll show you why that's important. When we've taken one of these guys, this one here, I have it pressed open. I'm not sure which direction I'm going to be laying these out, so I wanted to press that seam open. So let's do that with this guy. I'm going to warm up my threads. I'm going to use my strip stick and lay my unit right over top of it. It's kind of a weird angle, but slide the seam open first with my fingers, then come in with the iron, and isn't it nice that the only thing that's getting pressed is that seam straight down to the threads. Come back and flip it over again and pop my clapper onto it for a minute. What you can see is that the seam doesn't come into the corner. Again, I'm going to use the piece of paper, it makes it a little bit easier to see. See how the seam doesn't come into the corner? That's important because when we go to sew them together, that seam cannot come right into the corner of the block because it's not a 45-degree angle. I think it's almost 60, but I haven't actually measured. I just trust the lines on the ruler to do what they're supposed to. Now, I have one here that I sewed where I actually lined the points up exactly. So in this case, you can see that I've lined the point up here right with the point, the edge here. And what ends up happening then is when you press it open or you press it over, see how it doesn't line up as nicely? There's a corner here that we're going to be cutting off, and it doesn't give me the same amount of space for trimming. I'm going to open this one up and I'll show you. I'll put both of them underneath the ruler because we know everything Studio 180 related is all about oversizing just a little bit and trimming down for accuracy. It also makes it really hard to get the seam open because there's not a little tip that's sticking out. Struggled with that one, didn't I? Oh my goodness. Okay, so press that and you can see how wonky it looks compared to the other one. I don't want that on my cutting mat. I try never to leave a pin on my cutting mat because invariably you will have just replaced your blade and you'll end up slicing through it. So this is the wonky one that I had, and this is one that when I sewed it, you see the little tip up there? See the little red tip down there? And there was a green tip down there. So the idea now is we want to be able to come back in with the Split Rects ruler from Deb Tucker, and we want to trim that. So this guy here, I'm going to use the angle on here directly underneath the ruler for the size of the unit that I'm making. I am making 3 by 6 inch finished split rectangles. So I'm going to put that size line over top of my stitching line, and you can see there's a little bit of room on the sides here and a little bit less on the ends here, but there's fabric to trim away so that I know I can have that be perfectly positioned with the seam exactly where it needs to go. And you guys know I always recommend pulling all your pieces away so you can make sure that you've trimmed the whole thing, just like that one got caught. Lift the ruler, rotate the unit, put it back down underneath the cleanup lines. So now if I'm making a 3 by 6 finished, we all know it's going to be 3.5 by 6.5. So those lines on here, the cleanup lines, are right over top of the edge that I just trimmed. That same line that says 3 by 6 finished goes over top of my stitching line, and I'm able to trim away what I don't need. So now this guy looks the same as the other trimmed ones that I was showing you. But what if I go back to this one that didn't have the extra little dog ear at the top, the one that I lined up exactly right? See how there's not quite as much comfort level to slide the ruler up and down that seam to get it exactly where it needs to go. You can do it. It's kind of weird that that point hangs out there, the red one down here. Yes, you can trim it, which means that it's not a precision triangle that gets left up at the top and the bottom. Let me find another one. It doesn't have to be perfectly exactly the same each and every time you're trying to do that. But the idea is, if you jog that up and down a little bit so that you've got a cleaner edge along here, you've got a bit more room to be able to slide your ruler so that you know you've got fabric beyond your lines this way, beyond the edge of the ruler, and beyond where your length of your piece is. So you've got all that play up and down there, as opposed to only just a little bit. So it'll certainly still work that way. It's just a bit more of a comfort level to do it that direction. Okay, so I did a seam, this guy, with, no, it wasn't that one, it was this one, where the seam was going this direction, and I used the 3x6 marking lines. Now I've got one that's going the opposite direction. It's the mirror image. It doesn't matter how I turn this guy does not have a seam that's going the same direction. So when I want to trim it down, I need to be using the other angle, the one that says common diagonal seam line. It's the same line that I used when I was doing my second trim. It's doing double duty. But that line now goes over top of the seam line that's facing the other direction. So now I've got a line over top of that stitching line, and it gives me a perfectly proportioned, perfectly positioned split rectangle unit that previously might have caused you trouble when you were trying to make a pattern that had rectangles that you want the points to not be clipped off. It is very cool to see how that is perfectly positioned with the little bit of a notch between where the seam comes close to the corner. When we look at the ruler itself, see when I was trimming here, there's lines here that indicate where your 1/4 inch seam allowance is going to be when you're sewing something beside it. So when I've got it over top of the piece that I just trimmed, you can see where that stitching line, this way and this way, is going to intersect exactly where it needs to go. That's going to be in just exactly the right spot to be able to allow you to have perfect little points like you can see in my placemat here. So there are points here on my Split Rects units that there's a rectangle that's different from a half square triangle or a flying goose. The angle is different, and I want to know that that point is going to be perfectly preserved for all of those pieces that I want to turn into a great quilt like this Northern Neighbors one. I had a lot of students that took this class with me on the year of our sesquicentennial. Say that fast. I'd almost forgotten how to say that. So when we had our sesquicentennial in 2017, there was a lot of people that wanted to do this. Lots of them were done in red and white, but I love the fact that it's a maple leaf pattern. It's fall now. I love the placemat that I made out of one of them. So just the maple leaf with a strip of flying geese beside it. There's flying geese in the maple leaf as well, and you guys saw me do those with the wing clipper. Tons and tons of people have the wing clipper. Anybody who was watching our Creativity Week last week saw me use the wing clipper for something else again. We did the geese on the edge block. If you weren't able to tune in live to that, those YouTube videos have been recorded and you can see them on our Quilters Cupboard YouTube channel. So you can still see any of the videos that we did as a live presentation last week. You can still see them on the computer, so you can check some of them out. There were some great ones done by everybody in the store. A lot of fun to see. So I did something else that was another use for your wing clipper, and it's a perfect pairing with the split rectangle to give you those very cool maple leaves in there. There are a couple of patterns that I've got on the wall here behind me, and do you think you can see the split rectangles in those? When we look at the shapes on these guys, this particular pattern is called Diamonds and Pearls. I have some of the patterns here that we can use with the Split Rects ruler. So that particular one, Diamonds and Pearls, looks like this. And this guy was written by Deb Tucker, and it was in a magazine first. When I taught the class and when I made my sample was from the magazine. But it was beautiful to be able to make these split rectangles from a lot of different kinds of fabrics. I had the same background fabric, but I went scrappy with my split rectangle units. And these are 3x6 units. And then there's little ones that are done in the border. I love the border treatment of this, with these little babies that are finishing 1.5x3. Again, they're always a 2-to-1 ratio, but that was an awful lot of fun to make. That one, again, like I said, is called Diamonds and Pearls. This fall colored one on the wall here is, or on the rack here rather, is called, what is that guy called? That's called Prism. So that pattern is this one, and it ramps up your split rectangle unit. Here's a regular rectangle unit in this particular block, but then what if you turn around and take that block and sliver away a little corner of one of the colors, not the background, but of the color, and add an extra little piece to it. That gives you, again, an extra visual. Look at how cool these guys are when they are strung together as a border. So these are rectangle, split rectangle units with the extra little piece that's been added onto it. And I love the diamonding effect. That particular pattern is called Prism, and it looks a lot like Prism diamonds when you are, I'm trying to avoid the glare, see whether or not I can show that to you without the glare from the packaging. Love the effect of that very much. So there's the Diamonds and Pearls, there's the Prism. We have a copy of the Northern Neighbors here. When Deb Tucker wrote the pattern, she actually wrote it with a red and white quilt. She said she wrote it for her Canadian neighbors up north, so that was kind of cool. This one over here is called Fiesta, and this one, if you can see the split rectangle, it is, think about, there's your split rectangle, but what if you've got one behind it as well? Think about this as a split rectangle that is background and green, that has had a corner pop of background added onto it. You guys remember last month I did the corner pop tool. So visualize that there was a green and pale blue split rectangle that now has a 45-degree angle corner pop added onto it that's background. So it gives you this really, really sharp sliver point of color that comes together, and it makes these really cool pinwheels, doesn't it? I love the effect of that. This particular block is really cool, and like I said, it uses the split rectangle ruler, Split Rects ruler, and the corner pop, which you saw me use, so you know what you're doing with that tool. Love the effect of that one. That one, Fiesta, is great in all different kinds of colors and different kinds of backgrounds. And as you can see from the two that I've got back here, background doesn't always have to be just white. It can be other colors. I love the effect of the green with this one, and it drew out the green from these particular fabrics. And this one is a light blue, it's a mottled blue that's in that one. And this one, this beautiful, rich kind of gold color. I love the effect of that as well. There's a couple of patterns here that I haven't made samples of. I know, it's shocking, but there's a few that I haven't made. But the idea is that you know what you're doing when you recognize the components here. We've got split rectangle units here, and then there are little half square triangles beside it that give it the elongated star effect on that one. and they can be nudged right beside each other because you don't have a big, huge, long spike. So the effect of being able to nudge them together is very cool. I love that one with all the flying geese around the edge as well. This is one that's been designed by one of Deb Tucker's certified instructors, and this is called Getaway. And can you see the split rectangle units in there with the square squares in the center, and actually some Lemoyne star points as well on that one. That one's very cool. I love the effect of that. Own the pattern, haven't made it yet, but someday I hope to be able to. And this is one of the newer ones that has come into the store. This one's called Magic Carpet, and it's done by, the pattern was written by Deb Tucker. I was thinking it was from her Modern 180 line, like the Fiesta, but it's not. It's, I don't know that I'd call it traditional because of the white background, etc. But there's a split Recs component in it here. So there's actually 4-patch square up roll in there. There are flying geese in there. There are the split Recs that are part of the framing around the center here. And the Tucker trimmer is making some of your snail trail blocks and combination units. There's a lot of amazing piecing going on in that quilt. I love that one. It's very cool. We have talked before, I have talked before, about all of the design sheets from Tucker University. And each month when I was doing that with the students, there would be a new design sheet for the next ruler. And when we got to the Split Rects one, it was very cool to see some of the ideas of things that you could do with the Split Rects units. And I got a huge kick out of the idea of some of the bordering ones. That's a really neat effect. So that's something that you could do with some of these guys. If I was to clear the decks, give me a minute, I'm going to clear the decks and I'm going to lay some of these pieces out and show you part of what my plan is for them. Hang on. Okay, so going back to the idea from the design sheet, I found this amazing fabric that we have here in the store that it's not a panel, but I want to treat it like a panel. Certainly you could take any panel that you've got in your stash at home or that you find at a quilt shop. We always have lots of them because they're so amazing with the things that you can do with them. I love the coloring on this, and I chose all of these pieces to draw from what's in the panel. And so thinking about some of these where you want to actually be able to take advantage of the mirror image effects. So do you want to have all of your pieces lined up to go the same way? Do you want to alternate colors? Let's do a couple of these. If I have them lined up the same direction. See, this is where you start to spin them around and you recognize that they're not exactly the same. And it's really tricky to turn around and get yourself going back the right direction. So see how I've got these guys all going like this. So I've got them all lined up with the green. I don't want to do that. I want to put so you can see a little bit of the brown right beside it. That was the idea. I wanted the brown to frame, provide an inner border, and then get into the color of these guys. See how that draws that out of the panel that's in the center there. Now what if I want to do a mirror image? So I'm going to take one that's facing the other direction and replace it. What if I want to do that? So that is giving me this kind of a look, isn't it? So I could do them all in the same color on one side or the other if I wanted to. That's kind of a cool effect. Or turn around and add a different color. So, see how easy it is to get turned around? But once you recognize what you're doing, you can go, oh yeah, I really like the effect of that. What about if you want to do a zigzagging kind of effect? I get a big kick out of this one. I think that's really cool, isn't it? So this is one where you've got opposite color, opposite directions are creating sort of like an elongated chevron. I've got a chevron of the blue, I've got a chevron of the gold. I really like that effect. When you look at this guy on here, you've got split rectangles, and there's a corner pop on there, just like we did last month. So you add a corner pop onto one of these corners, and then you can have that kind of a peaks and valley effect. I didn't have time to do this after our creativity last week and the demo that I had to do for that, and then trying to get things ready for the final filming of the Luminous program. And this guy, I didn't have enough time to do everything that I wanted to, but I wanted to be able to show you guys some of the very cool effect of this. So the play options are pretty cool. There's a lot that you can do with all of those. These ones have got a couple of rows stacked, so if you wanted to do something like that, and you want them to be facing the same direction, let's do something like all of these guys are going the same way, so that's not going to give me what I want. If I want these guys to be chevroning on top of each other, I'm going to be looking to do something. What have we got going here? This is where design opportunities come into play. Not exactly what I was thinking, but that's a very cool effect as well, isn't it? So you can see kind of where the play options are many. And to be able to take something that you haven't done a lot of piecing on the inside, but you've done some piecing on the border that goes around it to add a little bit of oomph, a little bit of interest and pizzazz without it taking a ton of time or taking up a lot of space. Sometimes all we want is a lap size or a wall hanging or something like that. And so adding some fun components with the border can help to get you what you're looking for, to be able to create some really neat effects with that. You guys always hear me talking about Deb Tucker and the videos that she's got on her website. She has some amazing videos for the Split Rects tool as well, and she'll go through a whole bunch of border layout kinds of ideas for you to see what she does with it. I love the effect of this one. It gives it a real picture framing kind of border idea as well around the edge. The design sheet from Tucker University, you know, has got all kinds of block ideas on the back. So when we were doing our sampler blocks through the Tucker University, people were picking different ones of these and doing different kinds of things with them. So I have a couple of block ideas here that I want to show you and give you an idea of using the Split Rects tool for those different blocks. Just a moment. Again, let me clear the decks. I didn't do as great a job laying all of the options out here. I have so many ideas of what I want to do, and I didn't have time to sew them together. So have some fun yourself with play doing things like this. I obviously have a whole bunch of these guys made. I went for a big size so that they come together quickly, and the sky is the limit with what you want to do with them. Okay, hang on. A couple things to show you. Just a minute. Okay, so as I mentioned, it was a lot of fun to play with the Split Rects in our Tucker University class, and this was one of the blocks that I decided to make based on what's on the back of the design sheet. So here's my Split Rects units that I've added onto the side with a couple of blocks that I haven't shown you yet, a couple of components with the corner beam ruler, but it added a really neat effect to give me a whole faceted diamond kind of look in here. But the other really cool thing was when we had people that were taking the block that was in the prism quilt over here, and we pulled it into a really cool diamond. You can get this diamond effect from a whole bunch of Split Rects that are pulled together, just regular ones, but it was even ramped up a little bit more by adding the ones with the extra slivered away piece. So this was an example of the regular Split Rects unit, cut away a piece, add the purple, and turn around and trim it back down so that it's perfectly positioned exactly where it needs to go. The instructions in the pattern on how to do that and how to create that look in that particular pattern were really cool. And that is an amazing border, isn't it? I didn't do a very good job of laying out the border with my reds and greens and gold, but this is really cool. It doesn't have to be the fancier block. It can be just a regular Split Rects, and it creates a really cool bordering effect. And lots of block ideas in here. Another one that's on here is one where you've got, I just need, oh yeah, this guy here. So I took a whole bunch of leftovers from when I made my diamonds and pearls, and I had pieces that I had cut off, so I cut up a bunch of background green Split Rects pieces. Then I cut up some leftover bits from cutting all my colors and made a bunch of little Split Rects units, and they're exactly the same. We're just using different lines on our tool. So this little guy here is slightly oversized. You can see how it's got dog ears on the edge here. I always say to everybody, think about what we're doing with our Tucker tools. We're trimming everything down so that it's perfectly positioned. So if you go to sew a piece like this into a quilt top and you're thinking to yourself, man, there's little dog ears here, that's kind of messy, I don't remember there being dog ears before, that means it hasn't been trimmed. You have not used the business end of the Tucker ruler, whatever it is. If there's dog ears sticking out beyond the edges, it's because it hasn't been trimmed yet. So I also did not talk about how you use the markings on the ruler, etc. if you are a left-handed quilter. So when you want to cut your strips to start with, you're going to lay your strips vertical. So you've got the cut edge along the bottom here where you've trimmed your selvage off. You've got, based on the width, if it's a 7-inch strip, you're laying it so the 7 inches this way, and you're cutting with your rotary cutter up across the top so that you're doing a clean, safe left-hand cut. And then you're going to rotate the ruler around 180 degrees. Same thing, that piece that you've cut off lays under here, and you're able to cut straight across the top. So easy peasy still to do with a left-handed quilting method. And don't forget that on the Studio 180 website, there's left-handed pictorial instructions for all of her rulers and all of her technique sheets, so that you're able to print those and put them into a little binder yourself. So again, if we have got little guys like this, I'm looking to trim these. With them being small, they're a little harder to see with all the lines on that mat. So you're going to look at the one line that goes this direction over top of your stitching line, and it's going to trim to 2 by 3.5, giving you a 1.5 by 3 finished unit. That's what these guys are here. That's in the border there, and I used a bunch of them to create these cute pinwheels. How much fun are these guys? If you take these and pair them up with some blank background pieces, depending on whether you put that beside the long colored side of your split rectangle unit, or do you put the background strip exactly the same size as what you've trimmed it here. If it's trimming to 2 by 3.5, this is a 2 by 3.5 inch piece. So this one has that background piece on this side. So it's background to background, and the point comes together, the pinwheel comes together, looking quite a bit different. I have a whole bunch of these, and I have a whole bunch more because I have more pieces that I have made ready to go into blocks and make a secondary quilt. I don't ever want to have cut off pieces that I can't use anymore, or strips. I think these came from Fat Quarter sample bundles, something like that. So I had pieces left over, so I just cut them into smaller components, and I love the look. I love the effect of these. So again, something fun to do with the Split Rects and get a completely different looking kind of block. Okay, so one more thing, and that is, you guys know how much I enjoy the Blockbuster Series. So I hunted last night, found a couple, made one, and I really like the looks of this guy. Check this one out. This is a beauty. What do you see when you look at that, everybody? Can I see if that's underneath? There we go. We can see that underneath the video, the camera. So that is number 61. This one was just released in August, so very new, and it uses, do we recognize the V-block shape in here? You guys have seen a couple of these from me now. You should be knowing what a V-block shape is. And then we've got these spiky, very spiky split rectangle units. I love the effect of that. We've got the chevron effect with the V-blocks on top of each other. We've got the spikes coming out, thistle points or spears or whatever you want to call them, coming out of the corner of the block. And look how different you can make those depending on how differently you position your colorings. I wanted to have a little bit of gold in the center there. I'm actually going to take this out of the packaging, get rid of the glare. There we go. That one's very dramatic with the dark background, isn't it? I love the effect of that. And then depending on the size of the blocks that you're making, there are 5-inch, 10-inch, or 15-inch block instructions for what size of V-block and how many, what size of split rects, whether they're type 1, which is where the seam goes from the lower right to the upper left, that's a type 1 split rects unit, or is it a type 2 where the seam goes from the lower left to the upper right? That's a type 2. How many you need in all the different sizes, the small squares that are your spacer squares, and the large squares, corners and in the center. So all the information is there for the pieces that you need. You just go to the instructions that come with the ruler, and there's lots of instructions on each of the rulers, we know that, or also what's on any technique sheets, if she's got a technique sheet that's designed for that particular ruler. And speaking of technique sheets, there is in fact one for the Split Rects ruler. The technique sheet is called Split Rects Bonus Units. I have done a couple of these. I did them for my Tucker University class. I could not lay my hands on these for anything. Couldn't find them anywhere in the house last night. So I'm not sure where they ended up. They're in a little bag tucked in with some class bits somewhere. But there's great instructions on making the Split Rects bonus units in what is called, what do they call them? She had some names for them. An hourglass unit and a combination Split Rects is what she calls them. So it's like an elongated hourglass, this guy here. And then there's the combination unit, like a half square kind of combination unit, but with a split rectangle. Chart for sizes, all of the instructions on what you're doing with them, how to cut your fabrics, etc., and how to sew them together, and how to trim them, of course. There's even a separate download for marking on your ruler on the InvisiGrip on the back, the line for creating the little small triangle that becomes part A in these units. So like I said, there's an extra download on her free download page to do that. I think the new rulers, I have one here, the new rulers have, yep, the new rulers have that marked on there. It's called an option line. You see that on the new ruler there? But mine is older, and a lot of us that took Tucker University classes with me, you can still modify your ruler just the same way I did. All my rulers have InvisiGrip on the back so that they don't slip slide around too much. Mark the option line on there, and that helps you with getting the component A for your Split Rects bonus units. She just recently, like maybe a couple weeks ago, released a new how-to video on her Studio 180 website for the Split Rects bonus units. Go and watch it, it's amazing. Of course, all of her videos are, and watching her create what she's talked about with the ruler and the basic instructions or the technique sheets and how to expand them, that kind of thing. It's an amazing video. Check it out. She's done a great job. There are a couple of other free blockbusters that utilize the Split Rects unit. I love this one. This is Vanishing Point. Before I forget, I think I told you, but Sweetbriar is number 61, very recent. Vanishing Point is a combination of split rectangle units and half square triangles in different sizes. I love the effect of how those would make really cool pinwheels, depending on whether the small triangles are coming together or the large triangles are coming together for a pinwheeling effect. You've got another one here. This is number 13. It's called She Bear, just like a bear's claw paw. And that's got your spiky Split Rects units on the edge of that. There is another one here called Shuriken, number 14, and it's got Split Rects units around a center square. So creating something very cool and funky and sort of out of this world kind of looking. Number 13, number 14, and number 54. This one's kind of cool too. Creates the effect of a tree with some different coloring within the layers of the spiking tree or mountain or something like that. Again, all of these have different size blocks and the different components that you need, what you need for the sizings of what you're doing to create them. But have some fun, as you saw how many different patterns we have available, how many different block ideas there are, how many different things you can do with them for something that traditionally would cause people trouble because it's not a 45-degree angle where your seam comes right into the corner like it does with either a V block or a half square triangle. When that's the V block is very similar to your split rects. You want that seam to come into the corner when you sew them together, but the angles on the V block ruler give you the same positioning so that that's in exactly the right spot when you sew it together with some other pieces. And the split rects unit is just the same. So I hope you consider thinking about the split rects unit. There are so many, like I said, so many different patterns. I loved making all of these quilts. They're quite different. They're ramped up a little bit. The border treatment on these guys was completely different for each of them. I loved that kind of option. This did not use the split rects ruler. It didn't use a tucker ruler at all, actually. This is a seminal border where you're building your triangles on the edge of your squares that when you turn them on point, they become diamonds. So that's a seminal border kind of treatment. And of course it walks you through that in the pattern, the Fiesta one. They're all amazing quilts, amazing blocks, amazing processes, and I love them all and I'm enjoying sharing them all with you. So think about the split rects. We've got lots of them in stock and can certainly get more of them. Lots of pattern ideas for you to try. Take good care all. Bye-bye.